What's gains mean?
Gain, I don't know the technical term, but like if you increase the gain, then the mic is more sensitive.
Oh, sensitivity. Sarah's gonna love that.
Hit me.
Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast.
The podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
Brian Smith.
Justin Jones.
Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
Where are we right now?
Columbus, Ohio at Hoof Hearted.
I heard it's Hoof Hearted.
It might be.
For listeners, it's spelled H-O-O-F space H-E-A-R-T-E-D. So Hoof Hearted or Hoof Hearted.
Oh, you got it right there.
Yeah, I got it right here.
I'm like, damn, good spelling.
All right, so Ryan Smith is a fresh PT, hashtag fresh PT from The Ohio State University. He graduated in, when was that?
2013?
No, when did you graduate?
This last May?
May, okay,
Yeah,
May 2016. He started UMove Physiotherapy, and we connected kind of my last year here in Columbus. And I'll tell the listeners how we connected. So Ryan and I have actually slept together in the same bed. This was at CSM 2016 in Anaheim, California.
For frugal purposes. We're being frugal.
Yeah, we were just being frugal, splitting the costs. So we bonded on many levels. This is the PT level for sure. So I admire Ryan a lot. Many of you all are aware of him through his online presence. And just being willing to share his successes, his failures, his struggles, and just his journey so far. So, Ryan, give us the quick and dirty on what's been going on since you graduated.
So since I graduated in May, I started up the UMove Visio business June 1st. Started taking clients that day. It's been about a little over 4 months now. Mm-hmm. I've been out of a CrossFit gym and a strength conditioning gym, seeing clients here and there throughout that. I'm still working 2 other kind of non-PT jobs per se. Yeah. One is website design, the other is being a manager at a wine bar and restaurant, which both sneakily have things to do with PT.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later. So that's been going well. I've been able to, make a life out of it. I'm not being, overrun by debts or bills or anything. So, but mostly I just get to learn how to be a better PT every day and get to spend my time and get some value out of everything I do. So,
yeah, awesome. And so the UMove Physiotherapy, like that's your baby. I want listeners to check out the Therapy Insiders podcast that you did with them, because you really go into the nuts and bolts of your business and just because you're taking a big risk, starting your own business right out of school. But we won't talk much about that because that's talked about in other areas. Okay, so these 2 other jobs.
Yeah.
The lessons learned along the way. I want to hear about them. Let's start with are you Figlios?
Yeah, Filios.
Filios.
Oh, yeah.
I'm West Virginian. We say the G's. So how does that translate into being a physical therapist?
So I was a bartender for the longest time there and a server. So service industry is something I look highly upon for people I'm talking to, because it's customer service, and everything in healthcare today is about customer service. At least I keep being told that. So really it's, how do you have conversations with people? How do you create the best experience for them? Because at the end of the day, they're coming to your restaurant to spend their money they normally wouldn't have to, and they want a good experience out of it. It's not just the food, it's not just the service, it's everything coming together as one. So you learn so many things in that aspect of how to approach conversations with people. Yeah. My goal always, bartending or serving, when I used to, was can I have one great conversation with each table I'm with? Even when I'm busy, like I know if I can have one conversation that lasts a minute or 2 minutes maybe, and they get that, and we have something that we can joke about if I come back or something, like that's huge. It's just relating to those people and getting them the best experience possible. Yeah. So now that I switched over to the management role, I have a manager that is kind of the head of me essentially. Yeah. He's been there for a long time, but he mentors me every week about like, how did you handle that conversation with that customer or that interaction with that server? Yeah. So usually it's me coming in on Monday or Tuesday and being like, so I did this and this and this wrong on Saturday.
Yeah.
The place didn't burn down, but what would you have done instead? So just learning how to have conversations with people and get better at approaching that, and especially when the customers are angry. Like, how do you? And they ask questions that are kind of out of the blue, because I've never been asked the same question. It's never, oh, the food is bad. No, it's like, this and this happened.
Yeah.
What are you going to do for me? Like, it's crazy. And when to know when to back up your staff versus backing up the customer.
Yeah.
And always getting as much information possible for him.
Yeah.
So that's been the biggest thing. Yeah, I know. It's so much fun too. Like, I have a blast.
And I can speak firsthand. I mean, you probably remember this. So my wife and I, Megan, we had one of my old patients. We came to dinner once because she wasn't homebound anymore. Not because of physical therapy, for sure.
Yeah.
But she still remembers you. Like, whenever I talk to her, she'll ask. She doesn't remember your name. Be like, what about that bartender? Well, hey, because you poured us a mean 7 and 7.
Well, naturally.
Yeah. But yeah, it was very apparent the lessons that you've learned along the way. And it makes me kind of envious too, because I haven't had too much experience on that side of things, and I feel like the lessons that you're learning so young, I'm having to learn the hard way for sure. So I'm interested. What would you say to like the third year PT student or the new grad that kind of went the traditional route in terms of, they went to high school, they probably played sports, may or may not have worked. Then they went to undergraduate school where, school was their full-time job. And then they went straight into physical therapy school. Because I feel like that was a lot of people in my class, where we were really good at taking tests. We got great grades, but when it came to like common sense or just kind of like those soft skills, I guess I should just speak for myself. I was lacking tremendously and still do. But what would you say to those people? Like, what can they do to kind of get a crash course to get those lessons that you're learning in the bar or the restaurant in a much shorter period of time? Like, what would you say to them?
Oh, yeah, I'd say the easiest way, and it's probably available at most PT schools, is get involved in group exercise classes. Right. There's nothing more humbling than telling 20 people to do an exercise and it not looking at all. You're like, do a lunge, and you're like, oh, rolling around the floor. Like, it is, queuing in general is the hardest thing possible.
Yeah.
Queuing 20 people is even harder, especially if you're working in populations that have difficulty with movement. So I worked with a lot of Parkinson's classes.
Okay.
And that was the most humbling experience of my life. It's like how, first of all, they know what you want them to do.
Yeah.
But obviously with Parkinson's, it doesn't always work out that way. So you're like, okay, what do I do? How do I improv? How do I talk to people? You got to find a really good balance between approaching a group class and getting out the themes and the experiences you want them to have, and then being able to dial it back and take people off one-on-one and really have those conversations that need to be had. Like, hey, maybe we need to talk about some things outside of just movement. Yeah. So it's get involved in group exercise. One, you'll suck. I guarantee it. Nobody's good at group exercise. And two, it's a great experience to humble yourself and realize we don't always get the chance to be one-on-one with people. Realize what the benefits of group exercise have. And you'll see the real benefit of social support, I think, in those groups too. So it's a great crash course. Get involved in any group exercise you can. I think that'd be the best route for them.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Or go become a bartender. It's good to know how to make an old fashioned.
Oh, it is. It's very handy, especially when you live in Lexington, Kentucky, like this guy. What was that called? Where were you? Was that on 5th?
Yes, it was. Oh my gosh. Not Columbus Health Works. Delayed disease.
Okay, delayed disease. So a lot of the listeners have probably heard of that because it's a pretty popular certification that they'll go, across the country. So let's dig into that experience, because I remember when we first connected. I mean, you're kind of like I thought of you as like the CrossFit, super athletic, active PT that is going to be the next K-Star kind of guy, or the next Ryan Smith, I should say. But but then as we talked, I remember you bought like 2 or 3 T-shirts from the Senior Rehab Project. Oh yeah. And I was like, who is this kid? Like, what in the world? But then here, like, you really have a heart for older adults. So what was it about that class that that made you somewhat interested in the older adult population?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm
Drink a
stumped on
beer.
that. Yeah,
We'll drink. We'll buy some
sip to
time.
that. Damn.
What are you drinking, by the way?
A sour saison called I think it's called Crossing Swords from Hoof Hearted.
What am I drinking? I'm drinking a farmhouse ale. I don't know the name.
I think it's called Farmhouse Ale.
Yeah, Hoof Hearted.
Hoof Hearted.
Yeah.
Hoof?
It's Hoof Hearted. Okay.
I got you now.
All right.
So I think it came down to one, when I started working with people in the Parkinson's classes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them actually weren't, age-wise, they weren't much older than 50 for the most part. I had
Really? Huh.
relatively. I think I had a lot of people between the age of 40 and 55, 60, somewhere on there.
Mm-hmm.
So what we would consider, I think, pre-retirement, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I was astonished because a lot of them were type A personalities, like just go-getters. They had these amazing jobs, amazing careers.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they found something they couldn't overcome. And just like one, you could listen to them for days because they had these great stories. And I was so taken aback. So I'm like, wow, that could be me in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to get old either way. It's going to be me when I'm 75. So I started thinking about how would I want my lifestyle to be maintained when I get to 75. I don't want to lose all these things. I already saw that from becoming a high school athlete.
Yeah.
You kind of just work yourself to the bone, even in college at athletics too.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's over, and you lose a lot of that stuff. I don't want to lose that as I get older. So I respected them so much for that. Man, this can be like, this is a thing. Like there's people who are aging and they want to know how to go about it. We have so much information about exercise now.
Yeah.
It's no longer, well, you retire, you just go be lazy and do this stuff. Like, no, we can keep living longer and healthier and enjoy our lives. And that was crazy to see. So it's probably a combination of everything in there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it's a question you posed to me a long time ago. What would your training look like when you were 85?
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, I have no idea.
Yeah, it makes you think. Especially because you were, if I remember correctly, was it wrestling? Is that what?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's relatively intense and can probably only be sustained for so many years in terms of training it involves.
Yeah.
So yeah, how would it change? How has it changed for you?
Well, when I first started CrossFit, I was like, I went to the wall for everything. So I was going hard as I could.
Yeah.
A lot of things happened, and obviously I changed that. But the big thing is like I see the long game of what movement means for me now. It's no longer weights or time. It's like, what skills do I possess in my movement, I guess, repertoire that I can sustain for as long as possible. Like that made me step back and like, okay, I'm still seeing goals that I'm achieving with handstands and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
I wanted to be good at those things, just to be good and maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to the gym every day and feel beat up the next morning because I was trying to achieve this societal view of fitness, which is, you have to destroy yourself in a workout.
Right.
I get so tired of that notion that I really like being able to achieve and get some sort of mastery at certain skills. I think a lot of people are like that. There's still like a desire to, work really hard as best you can, but it's not every day. Like once or twice a week, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to work until I can't. So I'm breathing really, really heavy, or I can't do anymore. For the most part, it's like, okay, I'm going to get a little bit better at this, a little better at that, and try to translate it as much as I can to my life, which involves me selling my car at some point.
That's a shout out to Chris Hines.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to happen, Chris, I swear.
Yeah, Chris, your ears are probably burning. We've been talking about you and Mike Eisenhart for about 30 minutes before we hit record. So I mean, what you just said. Now let's take a look at where you're at now. So you move physiotherapy, and you are actively involved in a CrossFit box here in Columbus, Ohio.
Yep.
So I imagine your perspective potentially could be the minority in a lot of boxes. What has that been like, kind of going into a box from kind of the PT, or I don't want to say like authoritarian role. I mean, people probably look up to you. Like you're Dr. Ryan Smith. You got all these letters behind your name. You know what you're talking about, and then you may be preaching something that's a little different from what they're used to. Are the typical CrossFitters that you've interacted with, are they open to that, or what's the reaction been?
I'd say for the most part, yeah, absolutely. There's the culture of CrossFit, I still think is sort of being torn a little bit. It's one either going towards a sports direction, or it's going towards more of a general population health.
Okay.
So depending which box you're in, you'll kind of be more towards one or the other. I love both ways it's going. I mean, CrossFit is definitely a sport.
Yeah.
But just like all other sports, that's not able to be maintained throughout the entire life. Like, you don't see football players and boxers doing that when they're 75 years old.
Yeah.
Just for the demands that has. But what you can see people doing is exercising or fitness until they're 115, whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
So there's a divide there, I think, a little bit. But to answer your question, really, I'd say the majority of people are pretty open to it. But they also, and for maybe more for me of how it changed my perspective, is I see these people doing these workouts every day and going as hard as I can 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And doing all this, and they're fine. Like they're doing great. Like it's So maybe part of it is just me getting over that a little bit.
Right.
I would love to see how that is in 20 years. I don't know if that's sustainable, but again, I can't say it isn't.
Right. Yeah. We don't know yet.
They're still feeling good. And again, there's a big nutrition component to CrossFit, which a lot of people don't address, and that's great. But the majority of them are more interested to see, like, what am I doing movement-wise? Like, what can I demonstrate? Once I started showing different things here or there that might help, they bought into it. And I've given a few talks that there's been like, oh, that's kind of, eye-opening, just little things here and there. I've really realized that I can't just jump in and start preaching, because what they're doing is working. They're healthy, they have great nutrition, they're sleeping well, they love what they do.
Right.
And I learned really early on coming in that sometimes I just need to do the work. Like, I want to do a CrossFit workout, and if I'm scared of like what my form's going to look like sometimes, I'm going to get pummeled. I just need to go out and do it. And it looks better and it feels better. So
That's
just
a good
load
point.
it. Yeah, you just got to load it. And not think about it. Like, Louis Gifford always said, thoughtless, fearless movement. That's what we're trying to get to.
Right.
That's what the majority of boxers are already doing.
Right. So, wait, that phrase, that's on a t-shirt, right?
Somewhere.
You move .physio.
Go to the store tab. That's great.
Sorry.
No, that's great. It was a great. You could just self-advertise for myself.
I know.
But yeah, so I'd say that's probably what I'm getting at for the most part. It is well received. There's a lot of learning that's come on my end almost as much as their end too. And it's just trying to integrate those two mindsets a little bit more. So
that you mentioned the preaching part. Like, you can't go in and preach because what they're doing is working for them. I think that's something for all of us to consider, from you to me with doing the home health PT, and then even Tim DeFrancesco. He's a Lakers strength coach. I've had several conversations with him, just saying, like, how do you go about implementing change or trying to influence these athletes? I mean, regardless if it's Kobe Bryant or someone's been on the team for a few weeks. And he said the big challenge is that these a lot of them are at the pinnacle of their career, at the highest level of their sport, and they survived off Skittles or McDonald's, once a day or whatever. Just like the nutrition wasn't a big deal. They did whatever they want in terms of training, but they are just so gifted and have such amazing genetics to where, I'm not saying they don't work hard, but a lot of them, I mean, there's a lot of that involved, that they're just so amazing. So why would they change? If they're already on an NBA team, they're already making millions why would they, try and cut down this macronutrient or try and, deadlift more? Like, they're already cool, and it's just interesting to think about. But that's a lesson for, for you mentioned, but then for me, the geriatric PT that's in home health, because a lot of people, like, they're happy, with how they're functioning, and honestly, that may be okay. If that's what they want, honestly.
Absolutely.
But so it's just something that's difficult. It's not as easy as what you think, because we think like, oh, we have all the answers. If you would just listen to what I say. And I remember in school, I thought people would actually listen to me. And then you get out of school. It's not the case at all. So let's transition into school. How did school prepare you for working with the geriatric population, you think?
Well, I would say school was the reason I got involved in delayed disease. They had a partnership. I think it was service learning is what they called it. Essentially, you had to pick some sort of.
You're good.
Pick up some sort of extracurricular activity you wanted to do, and I chose delayed disease. And so from that aspect, it was huge. And getting to know group fitness, especially people with Parkinson's, and understanding what that was all about. I made some great connections that way.
Yeah.
But in terms of the other geriatric stuff, either I wasn't listening or, which is a definite chance. I was a terrible student.
Yeah.
Or we just didn't cover it as much as we wanted. And going into PT school, like you said, athlete, all this stuff, you don't think about geriatrics. It is a special population in your head at that point of like, I want to work with people who want to be healthy, without the realization that a lot of people who get older do want to remain healthy.
Right.
You can't associate old age with with obesity and cardiopulmonary disease and all this other stuff that happens. You can't do that. And it took me a while to realize that. And so I think it's just appreciating that mindset. But I guess, again, to answer the question, school in general prepared me well in terms of what I did outside of it. But I really don't remember what it taught me, like educationally wise.
Right.
We learned the basics of like what you need to know about being this age and what that means. So I really don't know. I learned from school besides the extra stuff I got outside of it.
Right. And it's tough too. I mean, I really sympathize with people in the academic setting. I mean, there's many people listening to this podcast who are in academics, and then I think about my school, University of Kentucky. What? And it's just like there's so much to cover. Like I know there's some colleges. Is it South College? It's really like pushing the brink and cutting down a lot of time and whatnot. But it's just challenging to cover all the different specialties. But one thing that did stick out is that I had a faculty member, Dr. Ann Harrison. You met her at CSM. She's a saint. I love her. And she actually was excited about geriatrics. She loved it. And it was obvious. She wasn't like preachy to us, like, here's geriatrics. It's important. You need to care about this stuff. It was just very infectious. But in school, I was not directly impacted. Like I loved her. She was my my DPT project. She was the lead researcher. Obviously,
whatever it was.
Remember a lot about that. But we got along really well. We did like a service trip together. But then in that time, I didn't directly think, oh, geriatrics. Like she makes me want to be in geriatrics. But the funny thing is that 2-3 years out of school, I found myself in a position where I was, fired from an outpatient job, took a contract to fill the gap between moves in a nursing home. And just all these things that she would say to me starts popping in. And I was just thinking about how excited she was and how like much of a gift it is to work with older adults. And it just like clicked. It's like, oh my gosh, Dr. Harrison, you were so right. The whole time, I was sports. So excitement, I think, is a big one. What do you think, what was the consensus of the students that you talked to? Like, if you were in a class that it was about geriatrics, what was the consensus?
Oh, the typical response. Like, well, they're older and they have so many, I think it was they have so many comorbidities, like so many other things going on. Like, what are we going to be able to do for them? Which I look back on that now as I say that out loud, and I'm like, we're fantastic for them. Like, taking the big picture of who that person is and what they want. What I meant to talk about you earlier is I'm listening to the audiobook Being Mortal by
you
Atul Gawande.
Tell me about this.
Dude, this, oh my gosh. You want to get me excited about geriatrics. All right. So anyways, I believe he is a surgeon, urology surgeon, something along those lines. But it's all about talking about how do we face the hard conversation about dying as well as getting older. Like, what does that mean? So he gives a ton of great stories about people who are faced with cancer that they're being told they're going to die, but also people who are just aging. He talks about it in a way of like, you're like, oh man, we neglect the fact that we're all going to die someday, or that we're all aging, and what aging actually does to us. This whole part of the book about like the changes as we age and what that means. And I started thinking, and I'm like, I always want to preach to people that we're going to be robust and adaptive, and you're always strong. And yes, those are true, but there's also a truth that you get old. Like you age, and at some point things slow down. So I started to look at it more as, well, our capacity just becomes a little bit less as we get older. But I would say in general, the majority of the population doesn't achieve what their capacity is or doesn't even know it. And so they kind of contain themselves in the box. And all of a sudden, one day they try to get out of that box to reach for something in the cupboard, and they can't. And so, right? I just thought about that.
That's
Man,
awesome. Write that down.
I know, I should. Good thing it's on a podcast. But I'm like, so it made me think about how more important stuff like CrossFit boxes and gyms and group fitness is to consistently show people that they can not only do these things and challenge them, but they can do it on a consistent basis. And I think that will allow people as they get older to achieve the level of capacity that they can. And they don't have to just even lose their capacity and lose everything beneath it, but achieve as much in that route as they can. The book is just, it's unbelievable.
Awesome.
I think I'm 3/4 way through it. Highly recommend it. It talks about my favorite things of having hard conversations, aging process, and it's great. Again, it makes you think about my own family. I was like, I have 3 out of 4 grandparents still living. I've been very fortunate, but they're going through a lot of these things of like, how do we talk about death and how we talk about aging? And they grew up in a time where they didn't know anything about exercise or movement, and it can show sometimes. I'm like, man, I don't want my parents to have to get to that point and not understand the benefits of moving and all this stuff. And I want them to live to their capacity as long as they possibly can. And when the time comes, we have that responsible discussion about that. And all that. Sounds super easy saying on a podcast. I'm sure it's really difficult.
And I know many people listening have had that conversation with their parents or their grandparents, and I mean, I'm starting to think about that with my family, and it's a challenge, especially just, I mean, you mentioned the cultural baggage with our mortality. I've met several boomers in that age group that they're still trying to look like they're 20 years old, not in terms of like, in fitness, trying to be, super fit to where they look young, but in terms of cosmetic surgeries or whatever it is. And I have people that I know really well to where a lot of that stems from just ignoring the inevitable, that we're all we're gonna die, at some point. And it's important to think about, and that's, I do like to think about the end game, like you talked about with your training, like have the end game in mind, train for the long game, to just be realistic and to know, what's going to come. But I mean, that can sound kind of depressing for some, but I mean, for me, it's kind of motivating. It's like, all right, like I have a reason to do some things right now to make sure, or to do what I can to make sure the end is as pleasant as I hope it to be, which honestly, I can't overcome everything by eating kale and lifting heavy things, but we need to think about it. And that's, it makes me think of a term that Ashton Applewhite used. She's the author of This Chair Rocks. She was on the podcast before,
which was awesome.
And she's amazing. And I'm about halfway through her book, and she just says she's an old person in training. And I mean, that's exactly how we're all old people in training. Some of us will get to that age to be old, but some of us won't. But we need to bring it up in the conversation and in schools as well. But I mean, it's definitely an issue that goes deeper than PT school. But I think it's helpful to have those conversations. And I know there's so many professors and people on staff in the academic institutions that are bringing these things up, and I'm very thankful for them. So let's try and just wrap things up here. Just ask you some quick questions. Your answers don't have to be quick by any means. So how old are you? Is it that inappropriate that Christina Novak got mad at me or not? She are you really gonna ask me how old I am? She's 26, by the way, at the recording of this podcast. But how old are you?
25.
25. Man, you're wise beyond your years.
I don't know that.
Okay, let's say the 22-year-old Ryan. What would you say to him?
Man, 22. I guess I'll place where I'm at quick. Give context. 22. So if I just turned 22, it means I just gotten into, or just finished. I just finished.
You finished your athletic training.
Yeah, I finished athletic training, and just got into DPT school. I think 3 weeks after I turned 22, I started PT school.
All right.
I would have, what have I told myself back then? Oh,
Don't drink as much? Or, no, I'm just kidding.
That first year, maybe, definitely. No, I really would have told myself, think about what you want a little bit more out of life, which it sounds silly now.
Yeah.
But I feel like I wasted a lot of that first year and a half just not really appreciating what I could learn and get out of my education. I think I would have just told myself to take a step back and slow down. And not just treat everything the way it is. And kind of look at things from a little different perspective. Which is funny because that's how I look at everything now.
I know.
But at the time, it was just, hit these check marks, hit these checkpoints, and, graduate and go get a job and do that, get a house, get a car. And it's amazing how far I've come from that day. But,
big 180. And I think, too, I don't know if there's too many athletic trainers that listen to this podcast. I'm sure there's a couple. But you having that ATC behind your name, going into PT school, you're in a position to where a good bit of that first year is review. To where that can, I know for me, I struggled the first year, not academically, but in the sense of like, do I really want to do this? Like, because I mean, you cover a lot, and you get to practice as an athletic trainer in college. Like, the experience is amazing. It's not easy. It's very difficult. A lot of hours, but that first year of PT school, I know, like, for me, it was a lot of like, do I want to keep doing this? Or, just kind of, it wasn't what I expected it to be, because so much of it was review. And did you have that same experience that first year?
Yes and no. Definitely the ortho stuff, which was predominantly first year, was kind of, I guess it's best summarized by a story. It's the first day of palpation lab, which is always great. And we were supposed to touch people's feet. And I looked around the room and everybody was like hesitating. And I'd come from working with hockey players and offensive linemen and football team with their feet look like gangrene without actually having gangrene. And so I'm like picking up feet and holding them from one leg and like, oh, look at this and that, navicular and yada yada. And I realized how weird that was at the time. Like, nobody had ever like touched people and approached how to touch people. I'm like, damn, this is weird. So in that sense, it was super easy. The academic portion, I'm terrible at it, so that was a little rough. But otherwise, it was agreed. Similar experience.
It prepares you pretty well. So that's the next question. So let's think of you move physiotherapy. You're doing your own thing. You're working in a CrossFit box in another gym up north, and you're very mobile. So there's a lot of home health PTs that listen to this, me being one of them. And we kind of have that, I don't know, it's almost like a freelancing kind of job. You're always moving, you're on the go, you're always on your tablet or your phone and calendars and all this stuff. So technology is like a big deal for us. So for you, what has been the most useful tool in terms of technology in your work with You Move Physio?
Ooh, that's a great
And it can be a
question.
simple answer.
But... Oh man, I would honestly probably say my Instagram app, video and camera.
Why?
Like Instagram, I do movement of the day every day. And I've gotten more responses and feedback from that than anything. And then two, the video and camera I use all the time with clients I work with. It's amazing how much people are they don't know what they look like when they move, or they're on, you just get a little snapshot, little video, and then all of a sudden something clicks. They're like, oh, something simple as that. They've never been shown what they look like when they're moving. So those have been the three biggest pieces of technology on my iPhone that I've used. So.
What because it's been a while since I've used video analysis. I used to use, I don't know what it's called now. I think it's called Huddle. It used to be called UberSense, and I used it like crazy. What do you use in terms of to show people what they look like?
I use combination, either the typical camera that's on the iPhone or an app called ProCam, which I think I paid for, and then Dartfish. Dartfish is a little more.
Go ahead, man.
I know. It's a little more higher up there.
Are people suiting up with the reflective
they should
things?
You get to draw the lines of like what angle it is. And Once I stopped measuring with the Goni, I gave up on it, but we're good. Oh, did I say that?
Oh, shoot.
Oh, jeez.
That's cool. All right, so next question. And this, I've been, not every time, but a lot of times when I ask this question, I think of you because I feel like you're the king of continuing education and you're only 1 year out of school. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's been your most helpful continuing ed course?
My most helpful? Ooh. All right, well, we'll see. Helpful, I'd say. Oh, man. I would probably say off the top of my head. Oh, damn it. Jeez.
I know, because you've taken so many. And you have a good relationship with all of them. So it's not to put any of them down, but what one has been like, oh, I'm so glad I took that when I started Move Physio.
You know, I will say the most helpful has probably been Julie Weave's course, Piston Science.
You were always talking about that piston.
Dude, I love the piston.
All about the piston.
And there's been, I'd say if you ask me like what was the most transformative or like thought changing, there's a couple different courses along those routes, but most helpful is definitely Julie's in terms of the same way people look at geriatrics, they look at women in general. And like they don't, it's like this whole other extraterrestrial life form, which is probably true for a lot of things, but in terms of healthcare, I never thought I understand.
Right.
I had no idea. I'm only doing this course pretty much, I think one or two of us, all these women, to get the perspective of what's going on with them. And then also understanding how the diaphragm, pelvic floor work together, how she described it. I can actually relate to women in that sense now, which is so crazy. And like have those hard conversations. Yeah, I don't know where you're going with this.
Let's be honest here. Were you going there to learn, or were you going there to try and meet a lady, Ryan? Let's be honest.
No, not meet a lady. Maybe how to talk to women better.
Okay. Well, tell us about your about February in San Antonio, CSM.
Oh, God, you're good at this. So I'm giving a talk on Thursday, which is the first day from 3 to 5 p.m., I believe.
Perfect.
I know. Cocktail hour after, for sure. But essentially me and another PT named Nate Mancias.
Okay.
We are doing a talk on males and pelvic health. What are we thinking?
Okay.
And it's going to be talking both about males in terms of us as clinicians, but also as males as patients in the scope of women's health and pelvic health.
Okay.
So I'll be talking a lot about what I just mentioned of how do you approach hard conversations with women about that. I'd say I've had 4 or 5 women on my caseload since I started. I've been able to ask the really hard questions that I think are really pertinent and not look like a doofus. And not look like
they didn't slap you across the face.
They did not slap me across the face. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And when they see that confidence in what you're asking, I feel like they feel very reassured that you actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things that they have going on that are more specific to women are very important to how they are doing moving.
Yeah.
Most helpful is definitely Julie Weave's course.
That's incredible, man. You're 25, right? You had 4 years athletic training. You went to PT school. You had these amazing rotations to where you were an outpatient orthopedic PT clinic that had a big emphasis on women's health, the entropy. Did that give it justice? I mean, I don't know can you call it a clinic? It's like an intellectual hub of world-changing thoughts and ideas. Is that?
They would probably agree. They'd like to call it home, I think. That's described as home. Intellectual hub.
So that amazing place, you have your experience in the CrossFit world, you have your experience with the group fitness, with the people that have Parkinson's. Like you have such like a wide breadth of knowledge and experience, and you're presenting at CSM for women's health. Like that's awesome. You're only 25. So now let's the last question and my favorite question. So we're at CSM after your happy hour. So we've already had a couple beers. So we'll say after you've had some beers at the Marriott or wherever we'll be come February of 2017, and you have every geriatric rehab clinician there at the bar. And they're saying, Ryan, impart some wisdom on us. They're all listening.
Oh, that's fantastic.
What would you tell them?
To every geriatric PT out there?
Yeah.
I would say find your client's or patient's strengths first. That would be the key. Because I
gave a fist bump. That's why I laughed there.
A little bit. I'll back that up with the same bias that we have that older individuals have lots of comorbidities. There's a little bit of truth in that. As you get older, you have a lot of stuff going on. this is best suited by a story, I guess. Again,
Okay,
I love
do it.
that. I was working with a lady who had, it looked like a rap sheet of all the stuff that she had going on health-wise. And when you're in a insurance-based thing, and yada, 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 you have to read everything off and clarify in the eval. And I looked up after asking probably if she had these 20 things, and she was almost in tears. And I'm like, I have just proven to this woman that she already feels really weak. Yeah. All she wants is help, and this isn't helping at all. And from that point on, I'm like, I really need to start telling people not only what can we work on, but what are they really good at.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do that enough in general, but especially for probably our older populations.
Yeah.
So to every geriatric PT out there, find your patient's strengths. Because ultimately the weaknesses are always going to be there. Yeah. But a lot of times the strengths can be really empowering to them and get them to do a lot of the habits you want to change. So, I sounded way better than I thought.
Oh my! Every home health physical therapist or occupational therapist or nurse that I don't think any nurses listen to this, but that last statement, I want you to think about the OASIS start of care form, and whenever you ask all those questions, think about the impact that could have on that patient. I know we have to answer them accurately, but just think about how that patient could feel after you ask them all 1,300 of the questions about all their impurities and how broken they are. Man, that was golden. You're only 1 year out, Ryan.
I surprised myself a little bit with that.
That's awesome.
Must be the beer.
Yeah. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
That Hoof Hearted. Ryan Smith, thank you for your time. We've slept together at a PT conference.
Yeah, stop saying
We've had
that
several
on podcast.
beers together. I hate that I just started to get to know you when I moved to Kentucky, but you're an awesome dude, man. I'm very, very fortunate to have met you in person and get to know you.
Appreciate it. Likewise.
Yeah. So for people that don't know Ryan, you should get to know him online. That's probably the easiest and the best way to do so. So where could people find you on the interwebs, Ryan?
Twitter, my handle is at @RyanSmith_DPT or at YouMovePhysio. Instagram is at YouMovePhysio. Facebook is facebook.com/YouMovePhysio.
Right.
I think that's pretty much it.
Yep.
But if you want to come to Columbus and hang out, more than happy to.
He's always down.
We'll do a couple of wads. We'll get some beers at Hoof Hearted. It'll be good.
All right, I'll come for the beers.
All right, a couple of wads. Sounds good.
All right, one more cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't. You're already finished.
That's
I'll
illegal, I
drink.
think.
Thanks, Ryan.
Appreciate it, Dustin.
Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you should hop on over to seniorrehabproject.com, where you can find more helpful content and how you can join me and many others in the movement that's changing the face of geriatric rehab. I appreciate you, and I'll talk with you next week. But in the meantime, do not forget to stay funky.